In the new UiPath Studio 2022.10, you can access the Data Manager panel from somewhere in the bottom right corner of the studio. Once you click on this, you can see the Data Manager panel opened. Let us go through the toolbar on the top. The new menu contains the menu items to create a new variable or a new argument. With this Expand All button, you can expand all the category nodes in the Data Manager. The Collapse All button collapses the category nodes in the Data Manager. The Refresh button refreshes the Data Manager and reloads the data into it. Basically, when you are connected to an orchestrator and you create a new asset or queue, you can see the newly added object after refresh here. The Group Items by Scope button allows you to group your variables in the panel depending on the scope assigned to them. You may notice the difference after grouping here. When I group the variable by scope, you can see the variables here appears under the specific group, whereas when I toggle this button, it appears in a flat structure. The Sync with Scope button here on the right hand side is like to display the variables within an active scope that is in focus. Say for example, if you select get asset activity or Excel file activity, it only displays the variable that are actively visible for this particular scope. Finally, the filter activity here on the right hand side lets you select what data you want to be visible in the panel. Creating variables. Select new here and select new variable. You can specify the variable name here and select the data type. It can be one of the data types listed. You can also specify the scope of the variable. So here I leave it to main so that this particular variable is visible within the main sequence. And there is an option to specify a default value required. You can also create a new variable by clicking in here. So if you see here, I have created two variables and both the variables are visible in the first sequence. But whereas when I select the main sequence, you can see that the int variable is not visible at the main sequence level. It is only visible within the first sequence. You can sort variables by just right clicking on the variables tab here and select sort. So there are multiple options. You can sort by name, type, that is the data type, and you can also sort it by scope. There are filter options wherein you can filter a specific set of variables. Say for example, if I want to see what are the variables that are available only within the first sequence scope, so I can filter it out that way. And to clear the filter, I can just click on the filter again so that it clears the filter. You can also bulk create variables by selecting the bulk create variables option here. The existing variables gets loaded automatically and you can keep adding variables as required. So this is an easy way for you to create many variables in one stretch. You can also create arguments the same way as we did for variables. You can right click and say create new argument. You can say arg name. Here you can mention the direction of the argument, whether it is in or out, and a data type for the argument. You can also mention it is a mandatory argument or not. And then if there is any default value, you can specify that. Return arguments can be specified as out arguments, and you can get the return output data also out of this argument. With the new version of UiPath 2022.10, you can create global variables. As you know, previously variable scope was within the workflow XAML file. You cannot have a single variable that is visible across XAML files. And in case if you want to pass a variable from one workflow to another workflow, you have to create an argument and pass the variable as an argument. But with the new introduction of new global variables, you can create global variables that is visible across workflows. Just right click here and say new global variable. So let me name it as GBL application name and let it be the value of type text, and the name of the application I can give it as my app. So this being a global variable, it will be listed here with the globe icon. You can see here the difference between the local variable and a global variable. So now this variable is visible in any part of the application. So say for example, if I create a new sequence here, and if I want to do a message box within the sequence, I can directly use the global variable, which is accessible within this particular new sequence. So if I run this file without passing any argument, this particular variable is still visible within my new sequence. These kind of global variables are visible across all the sequences that you have in your application. And you can see by default, when you notice here, you can see the global application name is available here. And if I select this new sequence, you can see here it is visible already without even passing any parameter for this particular workflow. Coming to constants, to create a new constant, just click on new constant. You can here specify the constant value here. When you create a constant, these are read-only values that can be used across the workflows. And you can see here, the constant can be accessible from anywhere. If I select this workflow, still the constant is visible here. And if I go into my new sequence, still the constant value is visible here. So you will be able to just use the constant value as usual within the workflow anywhere. So if I run the file now, you can see the constant is visible and it is giving me the message box. The only difference between the global variable and a constant is that you cannot assign or modify the constant at runtime. Say for example, if I want to use the assign activity here, and if I try to modify the constant value, you can see here it will not accept. Whereas in case of a global variable, you will be able to assign a value to the global variable at any point in time within the sequence. You can also manage orchestrator resources from the studio directly within the data manager. When your studio is connected to orchestrator, you will be able to look at all the processes, assets, and queues within the data manager like this. So if you want to add a new asset, you can directly add it within the orchestrator and come back here to refresh the data manager so that like your new assets are visible. And if I want to now add a new asset in orchestrator, I can directly navigate to orchestrator from here and select add asset. I say it's a new text-based asset and create the asset. If I come back now to the studio and hit refresh, you can see the new asset is added. Well, thanks for watching. If you want to watch more videos like this in future, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get a notification anytime I add new content like this. Alright, that's all I have for you today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time soon. Bye for now.